I've clawed my way up from nothing. And I mean that literally. My mom worked double shifts at a diner in Akron, Ohio for most of my childhood. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment where the radiator clanked all winter and the landlord never fixed anything. I put myself through Ohio State on scholarships, financial aid, and a part-time job filing insurance claims on weekends. By the time I was 28, I was a licensed CPA with a job at a mid-size accounting firm in Columbus, a decent apartment, and a savings account I'd built from scratch. I was proud of what I'd built. I still am. His name was Vincent. We met at a charity gala, the kind where you buy a ticket because your firm tells you it's good for networking, and you spend the first hour standing near the shrimp cocktail pretending you belong there. He walked up to me and said, "You look like you're calculating how much that centerpiece cost." And I laughed because I absolutely was. We dated for 8 months before he introduced me to his family. That should have told me something. But I was in love, and when you're in love, you file away the things that don't quite add up and tell yourself you'll revisit them later. His family lived in a colonial-style house in Dublin, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like it was trimmed with a ruler. His father had built a small commercial real estate portfolio over 30 years. His mother had never worked a day in her adult life, which she mentioned within the first 10 minutes of meeting me, the way some people mention it as a point of pride. The first dinner was a Sunday in October. I brought wine, a bottle I'd researched for 2 days, a Napa Cabernet that cost me more than I wanted to admit, and his mother accepted it with both hands and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zoe," she said, setting the bottle on the counter without looking at it again. "Vincent has told us so much about you." "You're an accountant," I said. "Right." She smiled again. "Practical." His father barely looked up from the football game. His sister, they called her Becca, though she introduced herself as Rebecca, watched me the entire meal like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve and kept coming up short. The food was fine, the conversation was not. At some point, his mother asked where I grew up, and when I said Akron, she nodded slowly and said, "Oh, that's such a resilient city," in the tone people use when they mean something else entirely. I got home that night with a tension headache behind my eyes. When Vincent called to ask how I thought it went, I told him it was lovely. He said, "They really liked you." I didn't push it. The second dinner was in November. This time I noticed things I hadn't the first time. The way his mother touched his arm when I said something she didn't like. The way his sister kept steering conversation toward things I didn't know. Their family's vacation property in the Outer Banks, the private club they'd belonged to for 30 years, a renovation they were doing on the second home. It wasn't conversations so much as a catalog of everything I wasn't. And then, halfway through the meal, I started to feel strange. It came on slowly, a kind of heaviness in my limbs that I first attributed to the long week I'd had. I'd closed an audit on Thursday and had barely slept. I thought maybe the wine had hit me harder than expected or the warmth of the house. I excused myself to use the restroom and stood over the sink for a moment, gripping the edge of the vanity. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was flushed. My eyes felt like they were moving a half second behind the rest of my head. I went back to the table. I made it through dessert. And then I remember Vincent saying something about showing me the back porch, and then I don't remember anything at all. I woke up on the living room sofa with a chenille throw blanket pulled over me. The room was dim, the TV was off, I was alone. I sat up slowly. My mouth was dry. My blouse, a silk one I'd bought specifically for the occasion, was buttoned wrong, not by 1 button, by 2. The bottom hem sat crooked, the whole thing shifted to the left. I stared at it for a long moment. I know how I dress myself, I've been doing it for 28 years. I am compulsively neat about it because when you grow up with not much, you take care of the things you have. My blazer was folded on the armchair across the room. I don't fold my blazer and put it across the room. I either wear it or I hang it up. Vincent appeared in the doorway. "Hey, sleepyhead. You crashed pretty hard. How long was I out?" "Couple hours. You must have been exhausted." I looked at him, then I looked down at my blouse. I buttoned it correctly, right there in front of him, slowly and deliberately. He watched me do it and didn't say a word. His mother appeared behind him. "We didn't want to wake you, sweetheart. Vincent said you've been working so hard." I nodded. I gathered my things. I said thank you for dinner. I drove home. I sat in my parking garage for 20 minutes before going upstairs. I'm a numbers person. I don't spiral. I don't catastrophize. What I do is look at the data available to me and ask what conclusion it supports. And the data available to me that night was just. I had been a healthy, sober-ish adult who inexplicably lost 2 hours of consciousness at my boyfriend's family's house, and when I woke up my clothes were wrong. The next morning, I called my doctor and got an appointment for that afternoon. I told her what happened: the sudden drowsiness, the blackout, the disorientation upon waking. She took it seriously. She ordered a tox screen. 3 days later, she called me back: zolpidem, a sedative, the kind used in sleep aids. In a dose high enough to knock someone out for a couple of hours, but not high enough to cause obvious alarm. I sat at my desk at work and stared at my phone screen for a very long time. Then I called my sister, who lives in Cleveland and has the kind of blunt, no-nonsense personality that I have always found comforting. "Someone drugged you," she said, "at his parents' house. That's what the test says." A long pause. "Zoe, what do you want to do?" I thought about it. I want to know why. Here's the thing about being an accountant: you notice things other people don't. You're trained to look for inconsistencies. You know what a balance sheet looks like when someone's hiding something, and you know how to go looking for it without making noise. In the weeks that followed, I didn't confront Vincent. I didn't tell him about the talk screen. I smiled, and I showed up to Sunday dinners, and I let his mother pour my drinks and brought them to the table. And I poured them quietly into the potted plant near the window when no one was looking. And I started paying attention. It started with something small. Vincent mentioned that his father's company had been going through a restructuring. When I asked what that meant, he changed the subject. The third time he changed the subject, I stopped asking and started researching. His father's company was called Mercer Property Holdings. It was a small commercial real estate LLC registered in Ohio. I'm a CPA. I know how to read public filings. I know what they're supposed to look like, and I know what it looks like when they don't. The filings for Mercer Property Holdings didn't look right. There were gaps, transfers between LLCs that didn't have obvious business purposes, deductions that seemed inflated. A property listed as a business asset that, based on the county auditor's records, was a vacation rental his family used personally. The kind of thing that, if someone were ever to look closely, could constitute tax fraud. I sat with this for a week. I turned it over. I asked myself if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing, or if I was building a case out of hurt feelings and a misread situation. Then I remembered waking up with my blouse buttoned wrong. The question wasn't whether something bad had happened. The question was what they were after. I went back through everything I had access to in my shared life with Vincent: our texts, our conversations, the things he'd asked me about work. And that's when I found it, or rather, I found the shape of it. He had asked me, casually and over many months, about my clients. Not by name, he knew better than that. But about processes, about how audits were triggered, about what kinds of red flags got reported to the IRS, about whether a CPA could get in trouble for something a client did without the CPA knowing. At the time, I'd answered him the way I answer anyone who's curious about my job: professionally, without thinking twice about it. Now I thought twice about it. I also thought about the 2 times I'd lost consciousness in his parents' house. Both times I'd had my work laptop in my bag. My laptop that has access to client files, internal communications, and, on one occasion during a particularly bad week when I'd been working remotely, a draft of a memo related to a client whose business had some structural similarities to Mercer Property Holdings. They hadn't been drugging me for something they'd already done to me. They'd been drugging me to get into my laptop. I bought a new laptop, a clean one, nothing on it. I put a sticky note on the case that said, "Backup Work Docs 2024. I started bringing it to Sunday dinners in my bag along with my real laptop, which I left in my car. 2 Sundays later, I woke up from another blackout. This time I'd pretended the wine was hitting me, made a show of feeling sleepy, let Vincent guide me to the sofa, and when I came to, I checked the new laptop. Someone had tried to log into it, multiple times, failed password attempts. The timestamp was during the window I'd been unconscious. I had them. I also had a hidden camera, the kind that looks like a chapstick, that I'd ordered off Amazon for $42, clipped to the outside of my bag, facing outward. I'd been running it since the previous Sunday. I didn't watch the footage alone. I called my sister and she drove down from Cleveland and we watched it together at my kitchen table with the door locked and 2 cups of coffee going cold between us. It was Vincent's sister, Rebecca. She came into the room where I was sleeping, sat down at the coffee table where my bag was, and spent approximately 12 minutes on the laptop. His mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching the hall. Vincent was not in the footage. I had a complicated 48 hours after that. I wanted to believe he hadn't known. I understand that about myself. I wanted there to be a version of this where the person I loved had been as deceived as I was, where the family he came from had done this without him. I sat with that version for a while before I let it go. Because here's what else I had: the questions he'd asked me about audits. The way he'd first asked me out at that gala, which I later found out was an event his father's company had sponsored. The way, over 8 months, he had very casually mapped out my professional life without me ever noticing I was being mapped. He had known, maybe not every detail, but he had known enough. I called a lawyer, not a friend with legal opinions, an actual attorney who specialized in financial crimes. Her name was unimportant. What mattered was that she had 20 years of experience, and she looked at what I'd laid out and said, "This is serious. You did the right thing documenting it." We talked about options. She talked about potential obstruction, computer fraud under the CFA, the sedative issue. I talked about what I wanted. What I wanted was for them to be fully and publicly accountable. The opportunity came at his parents' anniversary party. His parents had been married 30 years. His mother had planned a celebration for months, a dinner at a rented event space in downtown Columbus, 50 guests, catered, the kind of party that announces itself as significant. Vincent had asked me to come as his date. I said yes. I arrived with a small external drive in my clutch. On it were copies of everything: the talk screen results, the laptop access logs, the footage from the hidden camera, the financial filings and my annotations, and a summary memo I had written myself in the most precise, factual language I know how to produce, which is very precise and very factual. I had sent copies to my lawyer, to my sister, and to a secure cloud storage account before I ever walked through that door. I wasn't doing anything dramatic tonight. I wasn't confronting anyone in a hallway or making a speech. I had something more reliable in mind. 2 of the guests at the party were people I knew professionally. One was a partner at an accounting firm whose clients overlapped with some of the same commercial real estate sector. One was someone I'd met at an Ohio Society of CPAs event who, it turned out, had a side interest in financial compliance. I had called both of them beforehand. I had asked them, as professionals, if they would be willing to be present at a gathering where some financial documentation might be discussed. They had said yes. I also had, standing outside the venue, a former colleague who had left accounting to become an IRS examiner. He wasn't there in an official capacity. He was there as a private citizen, at my invitation for dinner. The party went fine for the first hour. I smiled, I made conversation. I declined every drink that wasn't handed to me directly by a server I'd watched pour it. Then his father stood up to give a toast. He talked about 30 years of building something together, about family, about legacy, about the importance of people who share your values and protect what you've built. I thought that was a good moment. I stood up. I want to be clear that I don't have a flair for drama. I'm not someone who makes speeches. What I did was quiet, deliberate, and surgical. I addressed the room and said that I had some information I believed was relevant to the evening's theme of legacy and accountability, and that I would like to share it with those present who might find it professionally significant. I handed printed copies of the summary memo to my 2 colleagues. I handed a copy to the IRS examiner, who was standing near the back of the room. Vincent's father went very still. His mother started to stand up and then didn't. Rebecca looked at her phone, then looked at me, then looked at the door. I said, calmly, that I had also documented an incident in which a controlled substance had been introduced into my drink at this family's home on more than one occasion, and that my medical records and a toxicology report supported this, and that there was video footage of an individual present in this room who had made unauthorized attempts to access my work computer during one of those incidents. The room was very quiet. Vincent said my name once. I looked at him. I had been with him for a year by that point. I had thought I loved him, and maybe I had, but I looked at him across a room full of people and I felt steady and clear and finished. "Don't," I said. His father's hands were shaking by the time the evening ended. His mother had left the room entirely. Rebecca had texted someone, probably a lawyer, so many times that the blue light of her phone was visible from across the room. The IRS examiner stepped outside to make a phone call. The formal investigation into Mercer Property Holdings was opened 6 weeks later. I was not part of the investigation. I was a witness and a reporting party, and my lawyer managed everything from a safe distance. The property transfer irregularities and the inflated deductions were the core of it. The criminal referral for the computer access incident and the drugging was handled separately. His father settled. The financial penalties were significant. His mother and Rebecca were named in the criminal referral related to the computer access and the sedative. The DA's office took it seriously. Sedating someone without their knowledge or consent in Ohio is a felony. So is unauthorized access to a computer system under federal law. Rebecca took a plea. His mother's case was still moving through the system the last I heard. Vincent called me 11 times in the 2 weeks after the party. I didn't answer. My lawyer sent a letter asking him not to contact me again. He stopped. I kept my job, I kept my clients. I had been meticulous about not involving any client information directly in any of this. Everything I'd identified about Mercer Property Holdings had come from public filings and my own observation, not from anything proprietary, and my attorney had confirmed I'd handled it correctly. My firm was informed of the situation because I believe in transparency and also because I wanted the record to be clear before anyone else could shape it. My managing partner told me I'd handled a very difficult situation professionally and moved on. I still work in Columbus. I still live in the same apartment, though I've been looking. I went back to Akron for Christmas and sat in my mom's kitchen and ate the green bean casserole she's made every year since I was 6 years old, and I didn't talk about any of this until the second day, when she asked how I was really doing and I told her. She set down her coffee mug and looked at me for a long time. "You got your evidence first," she said. "Yes." She picked up her mug again. "Good. I don't think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the doctor that first week. If I had accepted the explanation of exhaustion and stress. If I had written off the misaligned blouse and the strange haziness as a long November and too much wine. The chain of events that followed depended entirely on that one decision, to take myself to a doctor and say, out loud, I think something happened to me that I didn't consent to. That's the thing I want people to understand. If they're ever in a moment that doesn't add up, don't talk yourself out of it. Don't accept someone else's explanation for your own experience. Go get the data. Be the accountant of your own life. The numbers don't lie. They never do.